It's a little after 10 on a Friday night. A young man working a summer job at a small island airport picks up a phone and dials a federal aviation office in Connecticut. A single-engine plane, expected around 10, has not landed. He asks whether anyone can track it. He's told that information cannot be released over the phone. He hangs up. The plane is still missing. Welcome to Same Day, Different Century. I'm Zach. Today is July 16th. The pilot of that missing plane had been famous his entire life and had done nothing to earn the fame before he was old enough to remember any of it. He was born in November 1960, weeks after his father was elected president. He spent nearly all of his first 3 years in the White House. On his third birthday, the country watched a small boy stand on a Washington sidewalk and salute a flag-draped casket as it passed. His father had been assassinated 3 days before. The boy was John F. Kennedy Jr., and that photograph would trail him for the rest of his life. He grew up under cameras and never fully stepped out from under them. He studied American Studies at Brown, then law at New York University. He failed the New York bar exam twice, a rare public embarrassment because his family name guaranteed intense media attention. He would eventually pass on his third attempt. He spent 4 years as an assistant district attorney in Manhattan, winning all 6 of the cases he took to trial. In 1988, People magazine named him its sexiest man alive. In 1996, he married Carolyn, a publicist for Calvin Klein, and their marriage became its own tabloid subject. To much of the public, he was the surviving bright figure of what the press had long labeled Camelot, the son that many observers speculated might eventually seek public office himself. That summer, he had a wedding to get to. On Saturday, July 17th, his cousin Rory Kennedy was to marry at the family compound at Hyannis Port. Carolyn was coming with him. So was her older sister, Lauren Bissett, a Morgan Stanley banker who would be dropped first at Martha's Vineyard for her own weekend. The aircraft was a Piper Saratoga, single engine, 6 seats, faster and more complex than the Cessna he had trained on. He had owned it for about 3 months. Kennedy had taken up flying in late 1997 and earned his private license in April 1998. By that July, he had logged roughly 300 hours in the air, a modest total, including about 55 hours at night. Of those night hours, only around 9 were in the Saratoga, and less than an hour without an instructor beside him. He had passed the written exam toward an instrument rating, but never finished it. That absence mattered. Without an instrument rating, he was limited to visual flight rules, conditions where pilots are expected to maintain orientation by looking outside the aircraft rather than relying solely on instruments. 6 weeks earlier, he had fractured his ankle paragliding. The cast had come off only the day before the flight, and he was still limping and leaning on crutches. Whether the ankle affected his flying has been argued. His surgeon judged that he could still work the controls, and the crash investigators never treated the injury as a cause. Around 6:30 that evening, Kennedy checked the forecast. It called for visual conditions, clear skies and visibility ranging from 4 to 10 miles. He declined an instructor's offer to fly along with him. At 8:38, roughly 25 minutes after sunset, with the light already going, he lifted off from an airport in New Jersey, his wife and sister-in-law seated behind him, and turned toward the coast. He filed no flight plan, acknowledged his departure clearance, and then made no further radio contact. What the plane did over the next hour survives only because radar was watching. For most of the flight, nothing looked wrong. The Saratoga tracked northeast along the Connecticut shoreline at 5,500 feet, coastal lights below marking the seam between land and sea. The trouble came where the land gave out. The route to Martha's Vineyard required crossing about 30 miles of open water. Kennedy could have followed the shoreline the long way, staying over lit ground. Instead, he took the direct line across the Sound. As the plane passed Rhode Island and headed out over open water toward Martha's Vineyard, the lights fell away. About 35 miles from his destination, Kennedy began a planned descent. Gently at first, 400 to 800 feet per minute. 7 miles from shore, it started a right turn, leveled near 2,200 feet, climbed slightly, and then banked left. Then it descended again, and turned again. That wandering pattern is the fingerprint of what investigators would name spatial disorientation. When a pilot loses the horizon, the inner ear takes over, and the inner ear is a poor instrument. It can register level flight while the plane is banking. A pilot correcting a turn he cannot see may tighten it instead. The wing drops, the nose follows, airspeed climbs, and the aircraft winds downward in what pilots call a graveyard spiral, the gauges contradicting every physical sensation. In its final seconds, the Saratoga's rate of descent exceeded 4,700 feet per minute. In a matter of seconds after that last dive began, at roughly 9:40, it struck the Atlantic nose first, about 7 miles off Martha's Vineyard. Everyone aboard died on impact. When the plane failed to land, a friend waiting at the Vineyard Airport asked an employee to call the FAA, the call that went nowhere. Not until 2:15 in the morning did a family friend reach the Coast Guard. The search launched before dawn. It expanded quickly. Coast Guard, Navy, and Air Force units, along with civilian boats, worked the water. At the president's direction, vessels carrying sonar joined them. A suitcase belonging to Lauren Bissett washed up on a vineyard beach. After 2 days, the effort shifted from rescue to recovery. The wreckage was located late on July 20th. The next afternoon, July 21st, Navy divers brought up all 3 bodies, still strapped into their seats, from roughly 120 feet of water. The next day, their ashes were scattered at sea from a Navy destroyer. Recovering the plane explained how it had gone down. It settled nothing about what the loss would mean. The response was national. President Clinton spoke publicly about a family that, through decades of loss, had kept summoning Americans to public service. At a memorial mass in New York, Kennedy's uncle Ted delivered the eulogy, saying the family had dared to hope that John Kennedy would live to comb gray hair. The wedding he had been flying toward was postponed. In the press coverage, an old phrase resurfaced: the Kennedy curse. A president shot in 1963. His brother Robert shot in 1968. A cousin killed on a ski slope less than 2 years earlier. The phrase offers the comfort of a pattern, but it explains nothing. It binds a political assassination, the second assassination, a skiing accident, and a private plane crash as though one force joined them, when what joins them is a famous name and the ordinary, brutal arithmetic of a very large family living very public lives. The crash is often remembered as the recklessness of a rich amateur, but the record complicates that. Kennedy had trained seriously, flew this route often, and owned capable equipment. That is precisely what makes the accident instructive rather than simply careless. Spatial disorientation sits near the top of the causes in fatal small plane crashes, and it does not require an incompetent pilot. It requires a dark enough night, open water, a vanished horizon, and a flyer not trained to believe his instruments over his own senses. Kennedy met every one of those conditions at once. Some analysts add a human layer, a wedding the next morning, a late start, the pull to finish a trip already begun. The safety board kept its formal finding narrower. The pilot lost control during a descent over water at night, disoriented, with haze and darkness as factors. No mechanical fault was ever found. More than 25 years on, that flight is still taught. A standard case in how fast a calm night over dark water can strip the horizon from a capable pilot, and why the instrument rating Kennedy never finished is considered one of the most important safeguards in aviation. That same day, different century. I'm Zach. We'll be back tomorrow with another date, another story. Thanks for listening. Hey guys, it's Zach. Real quick before you go, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening. It really means a lot. If you enjoy the show, all I ask is that you share it with someone that you think would enjoy it too. That's the best way to help us out. I'll see you tomorrow.